Thank you for listening to this PodcastOne Sportsnet production, available on Apple Podcasts and PodcastOne.
The Steve Austin Show is brought to you in part by Great Clips. At Great Clips, they want you to love your haircut. That's why they created Clip Notes. Notes that tell them what you like, so you get your same great haircut every time, anywhere. With Clip Notes, no matter which stylist cuts your hair, you'll get the haircut you want. Great Clips. It's going to be great.
The following program is a PodcastOne.com production.
From Hollywood, California, by way of the Broken Skull Ranch, this is the Steve Austin Show.
Give me a hell yeah.
Hell yeah!
Now, here's Steve Austin.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Steve Austin Show. I'm coming to you from the mean streets of Los Angeles, California. Sitting here at my desk at 316 Gimmick Street, watching the second hand on this Pearl Beer neon clock spin around like a rotisserie chicken. Over to my right, Hershey the Wonder Dog is asleep. Over in the back room, Moolah is over there waiting for someone to play with her. My wife is sitting right in front of me. She's over there paying bills. That's right. They send those gimmicks they call bills in the mail to my place, too. And if you don't pay them, they'll turn off your electricity, your water, and take your cars back. So she's paying all our bills. She's not going to join me on today's podcast. And today's podcast is a good one. Here's how today's podcast happened. Man, a couple weeks ago, I got a direct message from Bull James. Bull Demspey, as he was known down there in NXT. NXT future endeavored him, and he's no longer Bull Demspey. On the independent scene and with Ring of Honor, he's Bull James. And he shot me his phone number, and I called him out of the blue, and we just sat there and talked about the business a couple of times. 30-minute, 45-minute conversation, just shooting the breeze. I really enjoyed talking to the guy. And I said, you know what? I'll bring him on a damn podcast, have a conversation with him, see what he's up to since he's departed NXT and he's out there on the indie scene. So he's a great guy. I really enjoyed talking to him, and I think you'll enjoy this conversation. He's got some good Dusty stories, and he's got some good stories of his own, along with some good Matt Borne stories, who used to play Doink The Clown. And it was interesting to talk about Matt Borne because he was so influential on my career back in 89 and 90 when I started off in Dallas. And then Matt Borne would end up in Jersey and able to help out a young Bull James on the independent scene there as Matt was on the same circuit. So anyway, a great podcast coming your way with Bull James. But before I get to Bull James, I'm going to finish the rest of my open. Before I finish the rest of my open, I want to give you guys on the front end of this podcast where Bull James is going to be wrestling at next. He's going to be with Tommy Dreamer, House of Hardcore, October 14th in Cleveland, Ohio. House of Hardcore, October 15th in Pittsburgh. And then for Ring of Honor down there in Fort Lauderdale, Florida on October 21st. Down there in Lakeland, Florida on October 22nd. Then with Superstar Promotions, they're going over to the UK. October 26th through the 29th, Liverpool, London, Grimsby, and Kings Lynn. So check out Bull James when he's coming to an area near you. Tell him Austin sent you. Anyway, Bull James coming up in my podcast conversation. I think you're going to enjoy this talk. Hey, man, I got a real interesting piece of mail in the mailbox the other day, and I opened it up with my broken skull, cold steel pocket knife, and it said, "You are a finalist in our 2017 Toyota Prius Hybrid giveaway." God dang, I jumped so high in the air, I almost hit my head on the ceiling. And it said, first, pull the tab on the attached VIN gauge code case, and your winning 6-digit VIN number will light up. Then scratch off the circle below. If the two numbers match, you're one of our grand prize winners. Now, you guys are going to hear me actually scratch off this number on the Thursday podcast because Rob Van Dam is my Thursday guest. He came over this past Saturday right during college football hours, and we sat there and talked for 2 hours. RVD is coming your way this Thursday and next Thursday. So anyway, RVD is here next Thursday, and I scratched off the numbers with my pocket knife of this circle, and they matched up on this little light up code case thing with the VIN number on it. I won. The numbers match up. You ain't got to wait till Thursday to hear the results of what I scratched off. You'll have to wait for the Badass Podcast with RVD, though. I got 4 things that I could have won. Either won a 2017 Toyota Prius Hybrid or $30,000 cash. Man, I might have to flip a coin on that one. Do I want a Toyota Prius or do I want 30 G's cash? Or the number 2 prize, Samsung 51-inch 3D plasma TV, or a new Apple iPad Air. I don't need a new Apple iPad Air. I ain't going to use that thing. Or number 4, 7-night Royal Caribbean cruise with airfare for 2. Well, I don't want to win a damn cruise because I can't stand cruises. I ain't going to get out on a big-ass boat in the water with a bunch of strangers, and then the boat craps out and you're stranded, and the toilets don't flush, and the food's all dirty. I ain't going on no cruise. So I want to win the Toyota Prius Hybrid. I'm going to make it into a 4-wheel drive and put some mud grip tires on it, and I'm going to take it down to Chip Foose. We're going to take the top off, and then we're going to lift it up, and that's going to be me and Teddy Fowler's hunting vehicle for 2016, 2017. Or if we get the 51-inch, well, Kristen, I got to go down there. Here's the thing. I scratched the numbers off this thing. I pulled the tab on the lighted up VIN number thing, and they matched up. So I called the 1-800 or the 888 number, the toll-free number, and the lady told me that I'd won. I said, okay, well, where do I go pick up my Toyota Prius or the 30 G's? And she said, well, first, you got to come to our dealership and listen to an hour PowerPoint presentation on what?
Not the dealership. It's about a timeshare.
Oh, yeah, I got to go listen to a timeshare presentation, a PowerPoint presentation. They got a bunch of technology involved in here about timeshares. I said, I don't have any interest in a timeshare. I just want my Prius or the 30 G's. And then she said, well, if you want to get it, you got to come to the PowerPoint presentation. I told her, quite honestly, I said, I'm a global icon and a national treasure. I ain't got time to come down and listen to a PowerPoint presentation about timeshares. So my illustrious wife, Kristen, is going to go down and listen to the PowerPoint presentation. And hopefully, if you take an Uber, Kristen, you can drive home in our new 2017 Toyota Prius Hybrid or pay the Uber with part of the $30,000 we will win. Or come back with a 51-inch plasma TV strapped on the top of that damn thing. Or come back with a little iPad Air. If they want to give us a cruise, we're going to have to sell a cruise. Because I ain't going on cruises because you know how I feel about cruise ships.
I'm not going to sell it. I'll give it.
We'll give it to somebody. If you want to go to, you know what? I'll have a giveaway here on the podcast. Because me and my wife don't do cruises. That's what we'll do. We'll give it away on the podcast. So hopefully, and you know what? If I win this iPad Air, I'm going to give that thing away on air too because I don't need no iPad Air. I got enough technology. What? Wait, Kristen, this ain't about you. This is about the people that have listened to the award-winning podcast that has never won a damn award.
There's still time.
Okay. So I think, Kristen, you have a week to go down there and listen to the presentation. Anyway, enough of that BS. God dang it. I watched UFC 204 this past Saturday. What an event it was. That damn main event. Michael Bisping, the champ. Dan Hendo Henderson in the main event. Hendo. Most likely 100% that's going to be his last fight. Holy smokes, what a war. What a war. What a fight. Michael Bisping won. Unanimous decision. But it didn't look like he won. God dang it. Dan Henderson hit him with some shots, dropped him, 2-3 times, and Bisping, he returned fire enough and stayed busy enough, and Henderson didn't really have a mark on him after the fight, but the fight was what it was, and it was a hell of a fight. Shout out to both guys. The story going into this fight for both guys, for Michael Bisping coming from the UK and a badass in his own right to have such a damn successful career. That knockout win against Luke Rockhold a couple of months ago, and pow, and all of a sudden you got a new champion. And then all of a sudden, after Dan Henderson knocked him out over 7 years ago with that big shot and that follow-up shot. And now, here these two are fighting. 7 years later, the title's on the line. Hendo's already knocked out Bisping in the past. Bisping with this great career. He's got a few eye problems. What a warrior. Henderson, from all of his wrestling background, for all the years that he's been fighting, some 20 years, to go into this main event. I was going to be happy to see either guy win because I'm a fan of both guys. I got to say, my heartstrings were pulling for Hendo just because I knew he was going to retire with that belt. But I was happy seeing Michael win it as well because of the way he's conducted himself. And I remember when Michael first came over here and started talking all that trash, and he was pretty brash. And I said, man, this guy's pretty cocky. I don't know if I like him. And then I started hearing him do commentary. I like, man, I really changed my tune on this guy. I really like this guy. He knows what he's doing. He can talk, and he can back it up. And he's really, really smart. And Hendo, I met him at the SHOT Show a couple years back. Real quiet guy, just minds his own business. Badass. Both guys are going to be Hall of Famers in the UFC. But anyway, yeah, Hendo was at the SHOT Show a couple years ago. He's a big hunter, likes to bow hunt. But anyway, shout out to both guys. God dang, Dan, I wish you'd have won that fight. And Michael, I'm glad you won it. Yeah, I can't have it both ways, but I'm just going to say, just from an event standpoint, I was a happy camper. I appreciate you guys putting on such a great pay-per-view. Before I wrap up this open, I also watched the WWE pay-per-view this past Sunday, the day after Saturday, while the presidential debate was going on, round 2. All I can say is Trump still won't answer a question directly, and Hillary can still spin a yarn about anything, and they spent so much time slinging mud at each other and not really going into any kind of depth, detail, or anything of substance. It just really makes you wonder what the next 4 years is going to be like. But anyway, enough about the next 4 years. We're here, we're now, we got Bull James coming up. And before we go any further today, how's this for what might go down as one of the greatest tag teams in the history of the pro wrestling business? Loot Crate and the WWE. Loot Crate is bringing you the first ever bi-monthly WWE Slam Crate box. And if you go to lootcrate.com/Austin and use the promo code Austin, you'll save $3 off any new subscription. The WWE Slam Crate box is badass too. The theme is the first, to celebrate some of the greatest firsts in WWE history. It's got a one-of-a-kind New Day collectible item, a shirt back from the grave, accessories from a special First Lady, and the first card from Austin Aries. A few crates will even have an autographed version of that card. So get yourself to lootcrate.com/Austin. Enter the promo code Austin and save $3 off any new subscription. But you got to do it by 9 p.m. Pacific time on the 19th. That's the cutoff to get the first WWE Slam Crate. If you don't order by then, you won't get one, because when they're gone, they're gone. It's a limited item. And for less than $20 per month, you get over $60 of value in every crate. So get your order in before it's too late. Go to lootcrate.com/Austin. Enter the promo code Austin and get $3 off any new subscription. That's lootcrate.com/Austin.
Welcome to Two Shorts Boombox, where every week it's a party in my studio. Me and all my interesting friends having dope conversations. And now my fans get to join in. Every episode is a lot of fun, baby. We dropping game for everybody, from the hip-hop heads to the entrepreneurs. And check out the new Too Short exclusives, unheard music from me and all my boombox artists. You don't want to miss an episode. Wednesdays, Too Short's Boombox. Download it now on the PodcastOne app, iTunes, or at PodcastOne.com.
The Steve Austin Show. The Steve Austin Show.
All right, we're rolling sound. I'm talking to Bull Demspey. Well, he was Bull Demspey. He is now Bull James out on the independent circuit. Bull, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Steve. Thanks for having me on.
Man, it's good talking to you again. You and I talked about a week or two ago, and I said, man, we had such a good conversation. I think it'd be good to have this guy on a podcast. So, hell, I called Bull literally out of the blue this morning. At first, I sent him a direct message because I'd lost his phone number, and he's got a real easy phone number to remember, and I couldn't remember it. So anyway, luckily, I rarely call people, so I would scroll through my phone, and I found your phone number. I was one digit off. But, Bull, when you're one digit off on a phone number, you ain't going to get the right person. So anyway, here we speak. Hey, let's go back. Let's start with the here and now. I was just on your Twitter account. For those of you who don't know who Bull Demspey is, who don't know who Bull James is, he's a professional wrestler. Used to be with WWE in the NXT system. Before that, many years on the independent scene, making a debut in 2005. We're going to cover all that. But let's go back to the here and now, because I was on your Twitter account, which is Real Bull James, at Real Bull James. You just got finished working with a young man named War King Hansen over there at the Suffolk Theater. How did that go, Bull? How was the house? Did you guys pack them in, and how was the match?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and getting to wrestle a guy like Hansen, who's, killing it in Ring of Honor right now. And he's been around the independents for a long time as well, so it's actually our first time getting in there together, which I've known him for a number of years, so it was actually a lot of fun and getting to do all that. And then the next night, wrestling Sal Sincere of WWF fame.
Man, how long has this War King Hansen been around? Because I don't get a whole lot of Ring of Honor. I rarely watch TV. I DVR Monday Night Raw, so I don't get a whole lot of that either. I missed the pay-per-view last night. So how long has War King been around?
I want to say 11 or 12 years now.
Okay, so he's got it. Is he pretty good?
Yeah, very good.
What kind of matches do you guys have? I'm not thinking that this was a scientific endeavor. I'm thinking a lot of brawling, a lot of closed fists.
Yeah, there was a few of them, and he's another bigger guy that can move. So he got a bunch of stuff that he can do and that I can do, and kind of mesh really well together. He's out over there missing big moonsaults, and I'm trying to set him up to go for a whoopee cushion and whole lot of back and forth and closed fists, like you said, and couple of kicks and stomps. You know how that usually works out.
Hey, well, I was watching some of your matches before we talked, and I'd watched several of your matches before we had our phone conversation a couple of weeks ago. Man, for a big guy, you're give or take 6'2", 300 pounds in that range. You move great for a big man. And so Hansen, same athletic ability?
Yeah, absolutely. He's, he can move real well and can break out some things I think people may not realize that a guy his size can do or should be able to do.
Hey, man, let's talk right now about how you're working on the independent scene versus what you were doing on the NXT scene, because I was going back to some of your matches. I guess you got the call up there, give or take, around 2013. I started watching some of your matches from 2014. Seemed like they were giving you a lot of squash matches. They were kind of lighting you on fire back in the day, and then you started turning into some 50-50 stuff, and then kind of getting towards your departure, starting to do some favors. And I guess your last match there was with Samoa Joe. I guess my question, Bull, is what is the difference between the NXT style and the independent style you're working now with a guy like Hansen?
I think the cool thing is, when you're in NXT and you're doing those live events, a lot of times you're working on one specific thing, and it's, hey, this needs to look a little bit better, or we need to clean this up. But now it's more of, I've been through that training, I've been through that system. I'm the one kind of passing things on to other guys now, but at the same time still trying to keep my name out there and do my thing. I think it's just having that freedom to kind of go wherever the crowd wants to kind of take it or wherever I want to take it. And there was something Terry Taylor said to me a couple of years back that, wrestling fans aren't going to remember full matches. They're going to remember moments. So I think that as long as I try to create a moment or two in each one of my matches where people can remember it and look back on it when they get home or go to work the next day, and, hey, I went to this wrestling show and this guy did this, or I saw Bull last week and he did this, and it's something that they can take home with them. I think as long as I try to do, a couple of things like that every night, then I'm doing my job.
Let's go back to your debut, man. By doing my calculations, man, you were born in 88. You made your debut in 2005. That would have put you at 17 years of age at your debut. Is my calculation correct?
You are correct. Yes, sir.
God dang it. And it's funny because I'm on your Twitter account, and you have a picture of teenage star Robbie Brookside. And I guess the caption there was, like, get a real job like your father. So What was the story with posting this picture and you starting at 17? Because I've seen a common thread here. When did you actually want to be a professional wrestler?
I think it was just when I was growing up, there was, I first got into it early 90s with my grandfather, and Hulk Hogan was still running wild and doing his thing. And then, there was kind of that gap in between, and I kind of fell out of wrestling a little bit. And then to come around like 4th or 5th grade, I started getting back into it. And then, that was when you started getting lit on fire and Rock and, Shawn Michaels and all these guys just started coming. And then the Attitude Era, and Undertaker and, your whole era of guys started going nuts, and the ratings were on fire and everybody was watching the show. And, how do you not get into something like that? And then in my head was, well, how do I do that? Everybody else was going, I can't wait to watch on Monday. And I'm like, I can't wait to be on Mondays. Like, how do I do this?
Okay, so you made your debut on October 28, 2005, East Coast Professional Wrestling under the ring name Donnie the Body Johnson. Hey, so
Correct.
At 17, you're making your debut. How long did you train before you got in the ring, and who was training you?
It's weird. There's never like one person I kind of give credit to. I've kind of been fortunate enough to be around a lot of really good guys. There were a lot of guys on the Northeast Independents because I was training for about 8 months before my first match. And guys like Judas Young and Kodiak Bear and Danny Inferno, guys that had, been journeyman guys for, the majority of their careers, but they knew their stuff and they were respected in the area. And they kind of, would pull me aside and teach me stuff because I was always at the school. The school was open 4 days a week, and I was there every day. I didn't care if I had to quit one job and pick up another crappy job just to have my days open to go and do that. And they were real helpful towards me. And then, just as time goes on, you just meet different people. And, guys like Danny Doring and Mikey Whipwreck and Tommy Dreamer have all helped me out along the way. And then guys like Matt Borne, like we've talked about, really went out of his way to, okay, here, sit down, kid. This is how you do this. And then from there, Taz opened up his finishing school, and I got accepted to that, and I came in and ended up working with him for over a year. And it just kind of all built, one thing on top of the other, and kind of just got me to where I am now.
Hey, let's get to Taz and let's get to Matt Borne here in a minute, because Matt Borne is a name that was near and dear to me, because when I was breaking in the USWA way back in 1989, Matt Borne was instrumental in really teaching me, some of the trade secrets or tricks of the trade, and going down the road with him. Hell, I made a road trip with him from Dallas all the way to Atlanta to a WCW television tape in the center stage and back. And that guy was an absolute riot. And, of course, he's a pretty wild guy on top of that. But he knew his stuff. When you say you were taught by a lot of journeyman guys, and you mentioned a few names, and guys have been successful on the independent scene, some of those guys are the best guys to learn from because they are very good hands in the ring. So at 17, when you start getting trained by the guys that you just mentioned, were you still in high school?
I was just out of high school. I graduated when I was 17 and started training probably, I want to say, with maybe like 2 or 3 months left in my senior year. So technically, yeah, but I was on my way out.
So if you're training with these guys, what did the training structure start with? I mean, because for me, it was rolling, taking a few tumbles, learn how to take a flat back bump. Those were the basics. Just learn how to fall and protect yourself. And then we kind of learned a little bit of chain wrestling, which is actually difficult for me to pick up. You're a big man, 6'2", 300. How did these guys who aren't your size develop you and give you your structure, your base knowledge?
Oh, it was funny. I still hadn't even hit like a real growth spurt yet. I hadn't grown into my body at all. So I wasn't the size I am now, but I knew enough to listen, and I knew, when I was going to start training, I made it a point to read every single wrestling autobiography because they had just started becoming like the hot thing. So I read everything, and then the one constant in it was show up, keep your mouth shut, shake everybody's hand. So I knew enough to at least do that, and just from that alone kind of carried over to a lot of these guys noticing me because of that and wanting to help me. And a lot of it, my first couple months was on the outside of the ring, learning holds and learning how to lock up and get stretched, because it was one of those things where if you're going to step foot in the ring, you're going to respect it, and it's going to be something that you earn.
When you were working with these guys and you started taking your first bookings and doing some of your first shows, how long was it after you were in the process of actually having matches before you went to the finishing school by Taz?
I was maybe 5 or 6 years in. It wasn't really till, or maybe even a little less, maybe like 4 or 5. So I had a good decent amount of matches, and I had worked with guys like Matt, leading up to that. And then that was when Taz opened up his school, and I sent, my little video package, and he liked it. And, brought me in.
So how much time did you spend with Taz?
It was supposed to be 6 weeks, but it wound up being about a year and a half.
So what was Taz able to refine in you or help you with?
I think it was just intensity and flipping that gear and, knowing when to turn the motor on and when to kind of keep it off. But a lot of it was really, just finding that mean streak and that intensity. And that was what I think took me from being, a good hand to somebody that maybe WWE would be interested in.
I'm glad you said that, and that's a compliment to Taz, because that's one of the things in watching your work that I notice your mean streak and I notice flipping a switch. And a lot of guys, I talk about this anytime I talk about the business. If it's a babyface, I'm talking about fire, I'm talking about selling. If it's a heel, I'm talking about a mean streak. And yes, you do have that, and when you flip the switch and it's time to go in aggressive mode and start whooping ass, you do. So compliment to Taz for teaching you that, and compliment to you for being able to execute it like you do. With that being said, let's talk about the illustrious Matt Borne, because if you're listening to this podcast and you don't know who Matt Borne is, guy from Portland, Oregon, I guess. He spent a lot of time in the Portland territory. I always figured he was born and raised in Portland. Came down to Dallas with me, ended up in several different promotions, but probably his biggest run that maybe many people don't know as, he was Doink the Clown. And, you've got this guy dressed as a clown. He's got makeup on. There were different people that they would put in that makeup or in that suit, but nobody was able to pull off the Doink the Clown character like Matt Borne did, because when Matt Borne put on that makeup and that clown suit, you'd think it was all about laughing and joking, and he's going to go out there and make people laugh. But, man, that guy had a scary side to him, and the way, his subtleties, the way he made that character, I don't know if the character was given to him as a rib by Vince McMahon, because you know how that creative process goes up there, at least at the NXT level. On the big stage, there's been a lot of ribs that have been passed out. But Matt Borne turned that into a legitimate gimmick that I thought was awesome.
Yeah, he ran with it, and it was something that I had talked to him about, because I was always, that original Doink scared the hell out of me, as a kid. But just knowing how he just decided to jump into it, to me was something I think that, I give him a lot of credit for, because it's hard to go from a guy who was pretty much raised in the business and, his dad, Tough Tony Borne, to kind of be this serious killer and kind of raise him the same way and in the business as a tough guy, and to have to go and do something like, hey, we're going to make you a clown. I know there was a lot of backlash from some of the guys in the locker room from what he told me, but that, Vince believed in it, and he knew that if Vince believed in it, then he could believe in it.
I remember way back in the day in Dallas, Texas, man, I might have been the opening match. I might have been second or third. I don't know. I was just lucky to be on a card. And back in those days, Matt Borne was working programs with the Von Erichs, with all the top guys. But at one particular point, he was working kind of a mid-card program with Jimmy Jack Funk, also out of that Portland territory, from Sandy Bars. What is it? His son? Jesus Christ. Anyway, back to Jimmy Jack Funk and Matt Borne. And they were going out and having these 15-minute babyface matches and going to 15-minute Broadway. And I'm telling you, man, for a 15-minute Broadway, and from top to bottom, the main event couldn't follow what those two guys were doing in the ring, because that's how good they were. That's how good the story they were telling was, and that's the kind of chemistry they had. And so, man, I just never figured either one of those guys got the credit they deserved. But to me, it seems like when Matt got the call to go to WWE, I'm just guessing, hey, this was his break, and then I don't know if it was a rib, but just his take on that character. Did you ever ride down the road with him, or were you guys just friends in the locker room?
Yeah, there was actually plenty of times where he had lived in South Jersey at the time, and I was doing a lot of New Jersey independence, so he would, ask me what I had coming up, or if we were on a show together. His girlfriend had an extra room in the house, so she would always he'd invite me over to stay, and, we'd stay up and drink some beers and watch wrestling and talk shop, and then she took us breakfast in the morning, and I'd go on my way. But I got to spend, those hours with him of just kicking back and really relaxed environment and just watching wrestling and just talking shop. It was really, just, hey, watch this guy, or here, I got some tapes to show you, or here, take this and watch it when you get home. Just so many just different insights about things. And he was really big on having me watch Terry Funk and Bruiser Brody and just because Terry would go out there and have a different match every night. And that was the thing that he admired the most about Terry Funk, was that Terry would go out there and do something completely different every single night and still garner a reaction.
Man, that's so awesome to hear that, because a lot of times guys will just get caught in a cycle, and it'll be, depending on the loop, depending on the territory, same match night after night. But did you by chance, just because I'm so curious, did he take that Doink gimmick? Did he think it was a rib played on him, or did you ask him the thought process to come up with that evil character that he did? Because there's two people that I can remember actually scaring kids at a WWF event. Number one being The Undertaker. When he made his debut so many years ago, when they showed the camera, when the camera showed the kids out there in the front row, mid crowd, whenever, the kids were absolutely scared to death. They didn't know what they were seeing. And then Matt Borne, not to the degree that Undertaker did, because Undertaker was 6'10", 300, but Doink,
sure,
that just hit the evil subtleties, just the way he'd laugh, the way he'd torture a guy. He scared people. Did you ever ask him about how he created that gimmick, that persona?
I did, and it's funny because we would always talk about it, and I know the obvious is that he watched It, the Stephen King movie. He would always kind of credit that, but he would also watch a lot of the early Batmans with the Joker and kind of take from that. And then Nicholson had done it in the original Batman movie. And then the other thing, though, that I thought was interesting was he stole a lot of the antics and stuff from Moondog Mayne back in Portland. And I guess Lonnie Mayne was a guy who was always ribbing in the locker room, and Matt would kind of see Lonnie doing that, and then as a kid, terrorize the boys and start ribbing them and putting locks on people's things. They wanted to kill him. But his dad was, pretty high up or promoting some of the towns, so they couldn't, they wouldn't touch him. But he kind of took that and morphed that into Doink, which I always thought was really, really cool.
You probably got Matt Borne. What year was it when you were hanging out with him and you were under his learning tree?
I want to say from 2009 on until he passed.
Okay, in 2009, and I was around him in 89, 90, maybe a little bit, 89, 90. And, man, if you subtract those years and do the math, he was still a pretty young guy. And, Matt, he was salty. He would fight anybody.
Oh.
He wasn't looking to fight, but he wasn't going to back down from a fight. He would party like there was no tomorrow, if the occasion called for it. But he was a guy that pulled a lot of ribs, enjoyed seeing ribs, but also he had bled a lot of that personality because, as you know, Matt was pretty sarcastic. He's very, very funny, but also very dry. And he was also a guy who, if you watched Matt in the dressing room, he observed everything. And I think some of the qualities that I just mentioned, he put into Doink. But it just took my conversation with you to realize that was kind of Matt. Being Matt, watching the things that you said he watched, but then turning it up, like I always say, to an 11.
For sure. And I was funny, the first interaction I had with him, we were booked against each other on a show. And, I kind of knew he's an old school guy. He's not going to want this young kid to come up to him that he's never met and, hey, I want to do this, this, and this, and this. So I just asked him, what do you want to do for a finish? And he told me, watch Boot in the Corner, whoopee cushion. And I said, okay, thank you. And I walked away. And it threw him completely off because I think he was waiting for, I have this big move that I do and I have this, and I just walked away. And then he kept kind of coming up to me, and he would, hey, if I tell you to do this, then I mean this. Okay, thank you. And I'd walk away from him again, and he was just so thrown by it. And I remember a couple of years later, he finally admitted to it that that was what made him realize I like this kid, because I was kind of ripping him when he thought that I'd be over there trying to correspond with him.
That was a pretty good story about how a wily guy with 5-6 years under your belt kind of works the wily veteran, because to your point, I mean, and not so much that you worked him, but you just weren't going to befuddle him with a bunch of talk about, hey, let's do this, can we do this, the old eager beaver routine, which anybody that's ever been in a business, from a grizzled vet to the young guy who is that guy that goes and does that, for some, for those guys, it just gets under your skin. It's like, we'll call it out there, kid, relax. And so I could just see why I would gravitate towards you after that story. Man, how did Matt ultimately pass? Because I had just started communicating with Matt through Twitter, and like I said, back in the day, it was his idea. Hey, Steve, let's drive to WCW, see if we can get booked. I said, hell, I'm in. And we drove all the way up there and drove all the way back, and we didn't get booked. But I spent a lot of time with Matt, and we had a lot of fun together. But what was the reason that he ultimately passed? Was it OD or what?
The ME's report was an overdose, but I know for a while there was the police were doing like a homicide investigation, so nobody still really knows what happened. There's just a bunch of different theories about it. I'm just grateful that the week before he passed, I got to spend a couple nights at his house hanging out with him. And, right before I started my drive to Florida to start working at NXT. So to kind of have that, it was kind of like, my chance to say goodbye. Obviously, I didn't know that at the time, but I'm glad that I had it because I can always look back on it now. And it's funny because the last thing he said to me, he actually mentioned your name, and he said, he goes, I'm going to tell you something that I've only told to Steve Austin and The Undertaker. He goes, you're going to make $1 million in this business. And that was the last thing he ever said to me. So I always have that. It always kind of helped to drive me, too.
Man, that's pretty damn cool. That's awesome, actually. I don't think you didn't tell me that story last time we were talking. We've only had 2 or 3.
No, I've never actually told it. It's just kind of, just thinking about it now kind of brought it out.
Man, okay. I'm glad you told me that because, like I said, we just started communicating a little bit on Twitter, and it seemed like Matt was in just because Matt had a few demons, but it just seemed like he was getting himself in a much better place, and then he was gone, and I was like, God dang, I just gotten back in touch with this guy, and now I'll never speak to him again. But a hard segue, but let's get out of that. Okay, got to take another minute here to say thanks to one of my longtime sponsors, who also happens to be a close personal friend of mine, Diamond Dallas Page and DDP Yoga. DDP Yoga has changed countless lives, including some of your favorite pro wrestlers like good old Jake Roberts, Scott Hall, Mick Foley, AJ Styles, and Chris Jericho. They all swear by DDP Yoga. And now DDP has taken his life-changing program to a whole nother level with the DDP Yoga Now app on iOS and Android devices. So now you ain't got no more excuses about why you can't start DDP Yoga. The app means you can do it anytime, anywhere. And the cool thing about the app is that you can do more than just DDP Yoga workouts. It's got all kinds of tracking features like pain tracking, measurements, and progress photos. DDP Yoga Now app users can do the original workouts, the new 2.0 workouts, and live workouts from the DDP Yoga Performance Center. And to make it even easier than he's already made it for a limited time, you can get the DDP Yoga DVDs for 20% off, plus 3 months of full access to the DDP Yoga Now app. Just go to ddpyoga.com/Austin. That's ddpyoga.com/Austin to take advantage of this great deal. Commit now. Change your life now. Go to ddpyoga.com/Austin to get started. Let's go to, your time in the Indies, your time with Matt Borne under that learning tree, your time with Taz. He put off a light bulb in your brain as far as the fire and the mean streak and that intensity, which you still display to this day. But so then, if you're on the indie scene, all of a sudden, you get a call in 2013 to go down to the NXT Performance Center. Did you send them something? Did they just say, hey, man, this guy looks like he's got potential, he's got size, he's got intensity, let's bring him in? How did you end up in the NXT system?
So it's funny because Matt kind of ties into that too, because like you said, he would kind of sit back and watch how things kind of progressed and before he made a move on anything. And all my friends were going for years, getting booked as extras, doing dark matches. At that point, you could pay for tryouts. They were paying for tryouts. And they would just get brought back every time, but nothing would ever break for them. So I kind of said, you know what, let me wait till I feel like I'm ready, and then I'll just take a shot. And then in the meantime, I had done a tryout for Ring of Honor. They said no. Taz was still working at TNA. He got me a couple dark matches with them. They said no. And I was kind of down and out a little bit, but I was still plugging away and doing indies and everything. And I had met Bill DeMott on an indie show a few years prior, probably, and he was back down as a head coach, but I also didn't want to be the guy that's going, hey, you remember me? Now that you're head coach, and here's my stuff. So I just reached out to him one night, and he got right back to me like 5 minutes later. And, hey, send your stuff here. Tell them I told you to call. And good luck with everything. I said, okay, well, that's a start. And then I called the office, and then they, because Bill said to book me, they booked me like right away. I went in. I worked the match just in the ring before the doors even opened. And that was when Scott Armstrong and William Regal and Art Anderson kind of pulled me aside after that and took a liking to me. Then it was just, I went back, I cut a promo that day that Regal really, really liked. He still talks about it sometimes. It's just always funny to me because he's a guy who's known for being able to pretty much pull off anything. And, to be an example that he uses is always really humbling. And from there, went back and did extra work again, and then that was when I was told I had to try out that February.
So how did the tryout go?
The hardest 3 days of my life. Just nonstop cardio and stuff of that nature. But I kind of had it in because Matt had reached out to Bill on my behalf. He had reached out to Jerry Briscoe on my behalf. I know during the tryout, I think JR and Taz talked a little bit just about, character stuff and what kind of person I was. And then I just I remember hitting it off with Dusty afterwards, after I cut my promo.
So what was your relationship with Dusty? Because, it was awesome. You got to give some Dusty stories because I'm watching a lot of your work. Great left jab. And then a lot of times you'll follow it up with the Dusty elbow. So I saw that. I also saw kind of when you're sending a guy in or off a high spot, kind of that Vader bomb or Vader thing in the middle of the ring. Did that move come from Vader?
Yeah. And I think it might have been Bill. When we were just kind of going over stuff and how to make something that somebody else is my own. And I know Vader would kind of stand with it. So then I think Bill had the idea to kind of have me jump with it and land over top of him.
Okay, I was wondering where that influence came from. Before we get into the conversation about Dusty and everything that he meant to you, just physically in the ring, other than the guys that trained you, maybe that thing from Vader, is there anybody else, and you mentioned watching Funk matches and Bruce and Brody matches, but was there any other person that was influential with the style that you have now?
I always loved Adrian Adonis's work, and Dick Murdoch and Dusty and those kind of guys, and I think that was the biggest thing, kind of how Matt transformed into Doink and kept that mean streak. Adonis at the time was a groundbreaking character, but when he got his heat, you knew it. And I always admired that because he would take these flashy bumps and all this stuff and do all this character stuff, but when it was time for him to kick somebody's ass, he kicked their ass.
Man, I think, and Adrian Adonis is another guy that doesn't get enough credit because I'll always tell people he's one of my favorite workers as well. Just because, when you saw him towards the end of his WWF run, I mean, he had before, he was tag teaming with Jesse the Body, but when he got into WWF and was just a solo act, that's when I really loved his work when he's wearing the lipstick or the makeup and all that stuff. But it was a great hand in the ring, shine up the babyface, but man, when it came to get the heat, he turned into a different person. He flipped the switch, and he just had this unbelievable mean streak. He was nasty, he was mean, he was foul, and, he was a left-handed guy. So his feeds for an arm drag, he was heavy, but he could take any bump in the world. His feeds for the arm drag were basically the extension of a punch, which warranted being arm dragged. That facilitated arm drag. A lot of times these days, because it's been just lost in transition or lost through the days, guys are just getting arm dragged because it's part of a high spot. Adrian threw that as a punch or trying to reach for a guy and ended up getting arm dragged. I don't know if you ever noticed that or not, but to your credit or to your point, Adrian Adonis was a fantastic worker. So let's get back to Dusty. Going under the learning tree, he hears you cut a promo. How did he come up to you? Obviously, you know who he is. How's this conversation go?
Oh, it was funny. I forget who I was talking to. So there was a bunch of guys at that tryout, and I remember I stayed up the whole night. I'm I need to come up with a promo that's going to impress these guys and blah, blah, blah. I'm in my own head about it to the point where I think I was completely screwed. I think I totally got way in my own head. And then to the point where I just said, screw it. I'm just going to cut a promo on what everybody else cuts a promo on. I'm just going to use their promos and do one on the fly. Because I said either they'll respect the fact that I have the guts to do it and can do it if I pull it off, or I'll fall flat on my face. But at least, at least I'll give something different than what everybody else is doing. And I used like a bunch of examples from different promos and kind of tied it all into mine and buried them, put myself over. And then afterwards, Dusty was telling a story about how him and Murdoch were at a bar picking up girls, and in the booth, and she didn't have any legs. And then there was something else where she didn't have any arms. But then later on in the story, he said something that he took her hand and brought her out to the dance floor. So then he asked everybody if they believed the story. And everybody's kind of like nodding their head yes, because nobody wants to say no. And then I raised my hand. And he, yeah, what is it? I said, how did you take your hand if she didn't have any arms? And he just kind of sat back and smiled because somebody called him out on it.
Because you were listening.
I think from there, that was it.
Yeah, but also, and I think you had to appreciate the fact that when you cut your promo, the fact that you sat back and listened and then responded. And so many promos are manufactured these days, because it's one thing to go out and cut a promo. Okay, that's that. But on the return fire, really, and everything's scripted these days, but back in the old days, before they started scripting things, you would listen to what a guy says, and then you would respond accordingly. So you were smart enough to have, and had the balls enough to, hey, man, let me just wing this, listen to what these guys said, fire back on them, bury them, get yourself over, put yourself over. And the fact that you called Dusty out on the fact that the person didn't have the arms, you were listening. So many people these days do not listen. So then how does this relationship evolve, and how influential was Dusty on your promos or just on the character? Did he help you with who and what Bull Demspey at that time was?
For sure. And I think he had the best understanding of it too. And I remember it was just little stuff like to give me confidence. He would always refer to he would always say guys like us when he would talk to me. So like right then and there, like that was always huge to me, because I looked up to him and admired him so much. To have him say guys like us, and even if he didn't mean it that way, or if he did, I'll never know. But it always kind of just boosted my confidence of like, hell yeah, I belong here.
Right.
And I belong standing in front of this guy and having him help me. And I think because he also knew my relationship with Matt, and Matt was one of the first guys he brought in when he took the book in WCW when he was Big Josh. And I think that kind of softened him up to me a little bit. And I think I would just always go and bother him too. I'd always go sit in his office and try to get as much as I could from him. And I think he respected that, because, he's the American dream. He likes the attention.
Was anybody else trying to get at him, or get his attention, or get under the learning tree?
Oh yeah, I mean, everybody there that knew who he was, and even the people that didn't, even the people that came in, I think there was just the way Dusty carried himself. They just knew, okay, this is somebody I should be around.
And it's funny that you would say that even people that came in that wouldn't know who he was, because, Dusty's generation was a couple of decades ago. And, of course, I remember him vividly. He was one of my favorite professional wrestlers of all time, and one of the reasons I got into the business. And also, my mother actually went to high school with Dusty in Austin, Texas. But it's just funny,
oh, wow.
All these years, and you're much younger than me, you're 28, but, to think that, some of these amateur wrestlers that they're recruiting these days, some of these football players that they're recruiting who maybe aren't good enough to play professional football, but maybe have the size, the structure, the frame, the charisma to be a professional wrestler, they're recruiting these kind of people. And, hey, man, they might not necessarily be wrestling fans, and they may not know who this heavy-set older guy is who just walks around in his Wrangler blue jeans. He happens to be, or happened to be, one of the greatest professional wrestlers and most charismatic in the history of the business.
Yeah, and it's the way he would come off, too. There's this heavy-set guy with a lisp who's, like you said, walking around in his regular jeans and talking a whole bunch of nonsense about what are they going to do, fire me, or what? Just spitting out whatever he wants. And it was just such a change of pace from the structured training that we had every day, where it was just show up, do your job, work hard, and then all of a sudden just here's Dream walking around going, Tell them to fire me. I don't care. I'm going to my office.
Hey, let's talk about the NXT training system down there, because as you came in, if you went there in 2013, you've been working 8 years, give or take, when you go into the NXT system, correct?
Just about, yeah.
Okay, so as I've heard Triple H say in the past, you can be wherever and learn from all these great people, but you got to come in and kind of, learn the WWE playbook. That's kind of almost a direct quote, paraphrased. So what is the playbook over, or maybe not what's the playbook, or here's how we do things, but tell me about the training program, because as a guy who comes in as a veteran, what did they teach you? Did they clean up your mechanics? Did they make your fundamentals stronger?
Well, I mean, I know I definitely walked out of there 10 times better than I walked in, but I would say as far as, maybe my psychology or there was a lot of stuff that Taz worked with me on that really I didn't realize till after I got there, ahead of the 8 ball, with a lot of the things they were trying to get out of guys, like that gear change and that flip of the switch, but I was already doing it. So I remember I was doing a match with Mojo Rawley, and it was designed as a get-over for him, and I got maybe like a minute of anything, and I just flipped the gear on him in the corner. And the story that I heard after that was, as I'm going off on him, Hunter turned around and took his headset off and said, "Hey, who's that guy?" And then Road Dogg came and got me after that match, and Hunter stood up from behind the monitor, shook my hand, told me it was money, and that to get ready because I was going to go on TV soon. So I think with a lot of that stuff, where, yeah, there was a lot of things like Norman Smiley, Robbie Brookside, those guys made me such a better wrestler and hand, but when it came to intensity and stuff like that, it was almost like I was ahead of the curve almost walking in.
What does the day consist of down there? Do you wake up at 6, be at the Performance Center at 8 or 9, do calisthenics, a warm-up, get in the ring, go through basics, then hit the weights? What is a day like in the life when you're down there in the learning system before you get on TV and after?
It is your life. Like you said, it's exactly what it is. You're up early. You're there early. You're either in the gym first or in the ring first, and then vice versa after that. There's extra training classes every day, which aren't mandatory, but if you want to get better, why aren't you there? There's a promo room. There's a green screen room to work on character stuff or maybe make some music videos or try to, come up with something to pitch to the writers. Promo classes. So you could be in there from 8 in the morning to 8 at night some days. It really is your life. And then the weekends, before they started really going on the road, it was a lot of the Florida live events. But that was, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and you're training in the morning. And then you're getting in the car. Then you're setting up the ring, doing the show, breaking the ring down, getting back in the car, trying to get a couple hours of sleep to get back to train the next morning. So it's hectic.
How many people are down there at any given time? Because, man, I saw the last recruiting class go in there, and it looked to be about 20, 25 people, but that was 20 to 25 people that they're bringing into the people that are already there. So how many human bodies are there? If you figured in trainers and trainees, how many people are at that center? I'm guessing 100.
Well, I know 100 was the goal. Like, that was always the number thrown around of we want 100 people in here from the day I got hired till the day that I was released. I don't know if they've hit 100 yet, but I think the most it ever got to when I was there was mid-70s, maybe pushing 80, and the lowest was maybe 60 or 65.
What's the dropout rate?
It's funny because I didn't think it was much until I just now going back, I'm finding pictures and there's all these group photos. I'm like, wow, that guy quit, or this guy lasted 2 weeks. It's pretty high because if you really break it down, because there was one fitness model who came in and she was going to give it a shot, and I think she did 2 forward rolls and got up and said, "This isn't for me," and walked out.
It's funny, Bull, because, growing up as a kid, you wanted to be a pro wrestler, and growing up as a kid, I wanted to be a pro wrestler, and so I just figured, man, doesn't everybody want to be a pro wrestler? And no, they don't. There's teachers, there's people in coal mines, and there's insurance salesmen, and there's surgeons, and there's all kinds of other things to do. But to me, it was just so in my head. But it really is amazing that once you get a newcomer, it doesn't matter whether they were an AAU wrestler or a football player. Once you get inside that 20 by 20 and just start going through the paces, whether it's the bumps, it's the chain wrestling or whatever it is, some people are allergic to it, and they just don't last. I had a similar encounter, like not so much like the fitness model, but in Tough Enough in 2011, Miss USA. It was a really, really nice girl, but her trying to take a bump was just agonizing to watch. And we voted her off the show, but at least she was game enough to give it a shot. But she was just allergic to taking bumps. When you first got in, how were you with the bumps and all that? Was it something that you just said, hey, man, I love this, give me more of it?
Oh, yeah, I loved it. It's like the first time I learned how to take a backdrop, I was like, oh, I want to take another one. And I want to do this, and I want to do that. And it's like, okay, slow down. Everybody that had been around for a while was going, all right, easy, kid, you're not going to want to take these bumps in a couple of years.
Well, and you have a very physical style. I mean, the diving headbutts, some of the other stuff you do, some high-impact stuff. Now, it's all grounded in reality. It's a safe style. But how do you feel now after some 11 years in the business?
I am a little banged up, but, from what I've seen out of other guys and guys that do work maybe more of a fast-paced or, a style with more bumps and stuff, I'm pretty fortunate, and knock on wood, to this day, no major injuries. I've always been healthy. I've always taken care of myself. I've always protected my body and protected my opponent. So I think, so far so good. Like I said, knock on wood, but I've been very fortunate so far.
All right, I need to take care of a quick thank you before we continue on. Y'all know I couldn't do this podcast if not for the sponsors, and if not for you guys supporting the sponsors. So thanks to DraftKings, the destination for 1 week fantasy football. Here's why you should be playing fantasy football at DraftKings. You ain't got to worry about bench warmers or busts. And by that I mean, I know some of you drafted Bengals tight end Tyler Eifert on your season-long team, and he's been out the whole season due to injury. So he's just sitting on your bench, taking up room while you wait for him to come back, which could be this weekend, actually. But with DraftKings, you don't need to waste the space on Eifert. You can just draft him the minute he's healthy enough to play. Here's the other thing about playing fantasy football at DraftKings. You ain't stuck with the same lineup week after week, so you can draft a different quarterback or receiver or running back every single time you play. And this is a good weekend to do it because DraftKings is hosting another huge fantasy contest with over $1 million in total prizes up for grabs. So get to DraftKings.com now and choose your players for this weekend's contest. And if you use my promo code Steve, you can play for free with your first deposit. That's promo code Steve to play for free for your share of over $1 million in total prizes this weekend, only at DraftKings.com. Eligibility restrictions may apply. See website for details. The chances of making it in the business of entertainment and anything you do, I think, is very tough, and especially so with pro wrestling. You were able to make it on the independent scene. You get the call up to go to NXT, and then all of a sudden they start. You come out with a bang. I like how you were squashing people. I liked how physical your style in the ring was. You couldn't see through it. It looked like a shoot. And then all of a sudden you go try to the Mojo Rawley thing. Hunter says that's going to be money. They end up giving that gimmick to Mojo Rawley, and they give you the bullfit gimmick. What happened there along the way between your first days there, you kind of settle in, you're clipping along, and then, hey, maybe you tried that gimmick, whatever happened to it, then you start doing the bullfit gimmick, and then go back to just a regular gimmick, and then you're out the door. What happened along the way during those years?
So some people will say that it's because Baron Corbin and I feuded, and they put him over because they wanted him to be the star. Then there's other people, and this is all, people online who think that they know what they're talking about. And then there's the argument of, well, he was doomed when Kevin Steen came in. I know I had a conversation with Hunter and with Bill, and they both had told me, hey, Kevin's coming in. You guys kind of look the same. You kind of work the same. And my argument was, no, we don't. We're two different people. We don't work the same style. We're two different characters completely. And it's funny because like, Kevin and I had like a long, maybe like 3 or 4 hour road trip, maybe like 6 months after he came in. And I just told him, I was like, yeah, I go, like, there was like, I felt like guys trying to light a fire under my ass by telling me that you're taking my spot. I'm like, but we're not the same guy. And we laughed about it because he said, like, you're right, we're completely different. But I think once somebody makes up their mind, all it takes is 1 or 2 guys maybe around them to kind of agree with it, and that's sometimes all it takes.
Well, I would agree with you. First of all, you could say you almost look similar because you're not bodybuilders. You're both big guys. I wouldn't say you look the same. I definitely don't think you work the same. I think your temperaments are different. I think your personalities are different. So I can't agree with that. I mean, it'd be like, okay, if someone that looked like superstar Billy Graham is the guy in your place, and then another guy that looks like superstar Billy Graham comes in, do you think they're going to tell the other guy that looks like superstar Billy Graham, hey, hey, we're going to get rid of you? You think it's a body thing? Because way back in the day when, not way back in the day, but a few years back when Bray Wyatt came in as Husky Harris, I was really pulling for that kid because here was a guy who wasn't a body guy per se, and of course comes from all the wrestling, background that he comes from, second, third generation with, the Wyndham with Rotunda being his father, all that stuff. I mean, second generation guy and related to Barry Windham, and kind of moved like Barry Windham, to tell you the truth, more than anybody. And I was cheering for the guy just because he wasn't a body guy. And then, of course, finally reinvented himself as Bray Wyatt. But that was one of the things, or it's one of the things that I still miss about the business today. When I was coming up, watching stuff in the mid-'80s, you had your guys that you had a few body guys, but most of the guys were either regular physiques. You had that flare physique that kind of looked like your classic wrestler. And you had the Road Warriors. You had Dusty Rhodes. You had a Bruiser Brody. There were all these different body types from ecto, meso to endo. And to me, that was refreshing. There for a period of time, I go back maybe 6-8 years when they first started FCW or whatever it was back in the day, everybody that they recruited looked like they just came out of the gym. They just came out of a tanning bed, and maybe they had a tattoo or so. And everybody looked the same. And to me, one of the best things I like about pro wrestling is the difference in the physiques. I don't want to see a bunch of bodybuilders in there wrestling. One guy's got to get a great physique, tremendous. What are your thoughts on that?
I completely agree. And, I know when we've obviously talked about it, and there was, there was a good 4 or 5 months when I first got released where it was just like a depression, and it sucks. You don't know what to do with yourself because you're used to this grind, and now it's like the complete 180 of go do a couple shows on the weekends, and all right, now what do I do with myself during the week? Like, I'm still making money, I'm still doing okay, but what do I do? So, now it's just getting myself back into a real structured training regimen and trying to just undo the last couple months of just sitting around a little bit. But it's never like, I don't ever want to be that guy with a six-pack, because as long as there's people coming up to me at shows, and they do it every show that I wrestle, and guys, guys or kids or anybody, women, saying, hey, these guys, there's like a lot of these guys look like they're in shape, but it's nice to see somebody different who can keep up with them. And I get it a lot, and it's actually like surprising how many times I get people who are like, it's, tell me it's an inspiration to them, or just how much they enjoy my stuff because I don't look a certain way. So I think as long as there's people out there that feel that way, I'm not going to go and change who I am just to appease, I'm a group of people with maybe a bigger voice than others.
And there's another thing that goes along with that, Bull. I mean, you can't, we're all given a deck of cards, and you're playing the cards that you've been given with respect to genetics and DNA. Hey, man, I can work out like a banshee, but I'm never going to look like the Ultimate Warrior just because there's just no way impossible. That guy has great genetics, but you just use what you got to work the best for you. And so there's been many guys that don't look like, some bodybuilder just came off the beach to make it in our business. I always tell people, some people that are still searching for the final gimmick that ends up bringing them success, that, when I look back at pictures when I started as Stunning Steve, yeah, it's a pretty decent-looking kid with long blonde hair and I didn't have any facial hair. And then, I went to Stunning Steve and WCW and Flying Brian with the Hollywood Blondes. And if you lined everybody up, and said to the executives who are running WCW, hey, man, I want you to pick 20 of the top guys out of that 40 standing there against the wall because those are the guys that we're going to run with. I don't think I would have been picked because I didn't stand out in the lineup. I wasn't the biggest guy there, wasn't the best-looking guy there. I could work pretty good, but you're just going on appearance. So, and then when I look at pictures that I see on people that post on Twitter of some of my formative years, the Stunning Steve Austin days, and then when I started losing my hair in WCW and I went with that short haircut that looked like crap. And it's like, man, everything's an evolution, whether it's a style of your wrestling, which I changed when I got dropped on my head, or the style when they brought me into WWF. And I gave myself the same haircut that Bruce Willis had in Pulp Fiction. And then as I was rooming with Dustin Rhodes, as he was running his Goldust back in the day, and we were working Pittsburgh at Mellon Arena, and I said, hey, man, I'm just going to shave all his hair off. There's an evolution in, either presentation of work. I don't think you need to change that. But have you thought any of just changing the gimmick, changing the attire, working with that? How deep have you thought about that as far as trying to make the transformation that could be the one that rings the bell for you or says to WWE, hey, man, we need to bring this kid back?
Well, it's funny. That was like the first thing I did was designed a whole new set of gear, a whole new look, because I didn't want to be somebody who had, I had like this mildly successful comedy character on NXT. I didn't want to try to go and work indies for the next 5 years just rehashing that gimmick and being that guy, because then it's just, you're pretty much done after that. My thing was, let me get back to the serious stuff when I was really rolling. Every now and again, yeah, sure, a house show type environment or an indie show and I can have some fun, yeah, we can cut loose with some stuff. But for the most part, I want to stick true to the stuff that got me there in the first place, and being that big guy with a motor who makes everything look believable. And I think I've been successful with doing that. And then, like I said, every now and again, there's stuff that a Norman Smiley or a Sarah Amato or Robbie Brookside or Regal or Finley has thrown at me, over the course of my time there, that I maybe wasn't able to use as much as I wanted or at all. But now I can throw it in whenever I want. And it kind of gives people, oh, wow, he can do other stuff. He can wrestle. He can do this. He can hang with the younger guys or with the smaller guys. So I think the first thing I did was try to, kind of reinvent myself and not go back to what I was, but just kind of update it.
Man, I tell you what, to just go on the same note of what you were saying about, hey, every now and then you can do some ha-ha. Back in the days, I think it was before I really got hot. I was feuding with, I wasn't feuding, I was working in some small town outside of Toronto with the Fake Razor. And, it was one of those nights where there wasn't a whole lot of people there, and all the boys were doing ha-ha. And so, it's not the kind of stuff that you would do on television or a major show, because it's a major market. And first of all, you don't want to kill the town off, and you damn sure don't want to kill yourself off. But every now and then, yeah, you can have a little fun in the ring. But, that being said, when you're at a big show, whether it's Ring of Honor or WWE or whatever, if you're trying to represent, you've got to be serious, because I love some of the comedy acts. But to me, for me, I like the serious stuff. I like serious wrestling. I love heat. I love when a babyface is over, and when you can mix in some personal issues and create something there that's not so manufactured and it's a believable storyline. To me, that's when the magic happens. It's great to have a little comic relief. I've did it, here and there across the world, sometimes doing the chicken wing thing with Bret the Hitman Hart to see if I could make him smile. But to me, it's serious business, and that's just the way I see pro wrestling. Am I wrong? Because I just think that's I like serious wrestling.
No, I'm totally with you. And I remember, there'd be times we're talking to some of the writers, and they would say, well, you can't take yourself too serious. Steve Austin did comedy. Kurt Angle, played the guitar for Vince McMahon. And I'm saying, yeah, but they did so much before that. You were established as Stone Cold. Kurt was an Olympic gold medalist who had a track record of being a top guy. Like, once you reach that point, then you can do all that stuff. I said, but we need to get there first before I'm just doing comedy. And that would always be the battle that I would fight with them.
Oh, I agree with that. You've got to get there first. And here's the thing. When I was working heel, it was just not too long after I turned heel against The Rock at 17, that's when Booker T came in and put me through the table, and I broke 3 of the transverse processes in my back. So I had 3 broke bones in my back. Well, they don't fix those. Once they get crushed flat, they just leave them like that. So I was in so much pain. Every time before I did work or before I did something, they'd have a doctor in there shooting me up 60 milligrams of Toradol, which is a whatever. It's it's a pain blocker. It's not any kind of a pain killer. It's a pain blocker, just so I could work. So the reason I started doing that comedy stuff in the vein that I was doing was because I wasn't getting heel as a heat. I couldn't work. I had 3 broke bones in my back, so I just needed to be entertaining, because if you're not entertaining, then what are you? You've got to be something, and I couldn't do anything, so I created all the comedy stuff just to further push the envelope. And here's the thing about working heel. I had such a run and set up such a base as a heel before, then the Monster Baby stuff, that parlayed into me being able to push the creative envelope any way I wanted to, because I could. And, as a babyface, you have to have these certain endearing characteristics or traits or some moral compass or ethics. As a heel, you can be all over the place. At the end of the day, I could sing, play guitar, but once I got in the ring, I was going to beat your ass. So there's ways to get around being the comedian. So if someone comes up to me and says, or listens to the podcast, say, hey, man, you're talking about not doing any joking stuff because you want to be serious. You did a lot of that when you were a heel. Oh, yeah, I did. On the sidelines. When it came back to getting the ring, it wasn't no playing around. It was ass-beating time. So anyway, let him jump off my high horse there, Bull. Let's get back to you. You're on the indie scene. What you got coming up next?
This weekend, October 14th and 15th, I'm in Pittsburgh and Cleveland for Tommy Dreamer for House of Hardcore. And then I'm going the next weekend to Florida for Ring of Honor. I'll be in Fort Lauderdale October 21st, wrestling Adam Cole, and Lakeland on October 22nd. And then from there, I go to the UK for a week, and then I'm back home for some local stuff.
Hey, man, that's awesome. I'm glad you're staying busy. Until Tommy Dreamer, I said hello. I had him on a podcast a long time ago, and he came to my hotel room in New York City, and we laughed our asses off while we watched traffic from about 25 floors up in the air. I'm glad.
I remember listening to him.
He's one. I barely know Tommy, but he's one of the nicest guys I've ever met in the business. So I'm glad you're hooking up there. A Ring of Honor, and all those dates over in England.
Thanks for giving me a platform, and thanks for trying to kind of guide me on the right path. I appreciate it.
Anytime, Bull. Until we talk again, I'll catch you down the road.
All right. I'll have a swig of beer for you.
You got it. I'll talk to you later. All right, everybody, give me the go-home cue. It's time to wrap up this podcast and ride off in the sunset. When I say ride off in the sunset, I'm taking my ass to the gym. I'm training back today, and I'm going to do about 20 minutes of high-intensity cardio. Hell, I'm making a comeback. No, not to the squared circle. I'm just getting my ass in shape. The quest continues, as it always does. The task at hand is to go out there and bang out back and recover from my shoulder surgery. Hey, thanks to Bull James for being my guest today. It's always a pleasure to talk to that young man. He's got a good head on his shoulders, and I wish him well. He's coming over there. You heard the dates, Tommy Dreamer's promotion. He's going to Ring of Honor. He's going over to the UK for 4 dates. You heard me plug those dates in the opening of the show, and you just heard Bull drop them. So go check that man out. Tell him Austin sent you. Hey, before I sign off and give you some plugs, I'm going to give you guys something to watch on YouTube. A lot of times before I go to sleep, I'll get on YouTube and watch some of my old musicians that I watched back in the day. And some of you younger cats might not have ever heard of these people, so I'm going to start dropping some of these guys on you. Something to watch is Waylon Jennings. Check out his live performances, because you can watch the ones that just got the still picture there, but when you watch the guy sing and play, he's so entertaining. Waylon is kind of one of the front runners of the outlaw country music way back in the day. And Waylon was a hell of a singer. He was a songwriter, and when he kind of hit that outlaw country style, that's when he really took off. What a lot of people don't know about Waylon Jennings is there was a hell of a guitar player, that chicken-picking style that he had. Man, he was badass on the guitar, one of my favorite singers of all time, so check him out on YouTube. Are You Sure Hank Done It This Way is one of my favorites. Lukenbach, Texas, and I've Always Been Crazy. Those are 3 songs that rock the damn jukebox anytime you push the buttons, and they rock your YouTube channel if you push it. And they'll rock you on the YouTube channel if you type in what I told you to type in. Waylon Jennings, one of the best to ever do it, and an American original from Littlefield, Texas. I read his book some 10, 15 years ago, and I don't remember nothing, but I remember where Waylon Jennings is from, and they had a dirt floor in that house. Go check out his book if you want to read about him. That's enough of me running my damn gums. Hey, I got some new shirts over at ProWrestlingTees.com/Steve Austin, also at BrokenSkullRanch.com, and I'm going to start dropping the new cool designs that I wore on this season of Broken Skull Challenge, so those are going to be coming your way very soon. And if you're looking for the best damn IPA available, I got it. It's called Broken Skull IPA from El Segundo Brewing Company. Stop into the brewery if you're in L.A., 140 Main Street, El Segundo, California. If you're in Cali, pick it up at Whole Foods and Total Wines, or order it from InsideTheCellar.com or BrokenSkullRanch.com, and they'll deliver it to you if you live in a state that they ship to. And check out the Steve Austin Broken Skull Cold Steel Knife at BrokenSkullRanch.com. There's a link. The best place to find that knife is at Amazon.com for $75. Hey, I appreciate all the word-of-mouth advertising y'all are doing on behalf of the podcast. I ain't got an advertising budget up in this thing, and I appreciate y'all supporting the sponsors of the Steve Austin podcast because they are the ones who let me do this for you free twice a week. So big thanks to Loot Crate. Go to lootcrate.com/Austin and use the promo code Austin to save $3 off any new subscription. Big thanks to my man DDP at ddpyoga.com/Austin. Get 20% off the DDP Yoga DVDs and 3 months of full access to the DDP Yoga Now app for a limited time. Hey, DraftKings, thanks. Use my promo code STEVE to play for free this weekend. And, of course, a big thank you to Amazon, who have been supporting this podcast since day one. Just use my Amazon links whenever you're doing any online shopping, and Amazon will kick back a couple of bucks to the podcast. Doesn't cost you anything extra. There's no hidden fees or charges. You can buy whatever you're planning on buying and help out the podcast in the process. You can find my Amazon links by going to PodcastOne.com, clicking on the Killer Deals button in the top right corner of the page, and then hitting the Steve Austin Show button. I got Amazon links for Amazon USA, Amazon UK, and Amazon Canada. So again, just go to PodcastOne.com, click the Killer Deals button in the top right corner, and then click on the Steve Austin Show. Bookmark it. You can find it in one click. Hey, the 60-second AP News headlines are coming up next. Do not miss Thursday's show with Rob Van Dam. Great conversation with a real interesting cat. Until then, my name is Steve Austin, and I will catch your ass down the road.
Download new episodes of The Steve Austin Show every Tuesday at PodcastOne.com. That's PodcastOne.com.